It's wonderful to have you, Catherine, and Raquel here with us. Thank you for making time. And we're super excited that you've got a paper that we've just accepted in our special issue of the Journal of Action Research on climate change and the sort of potential of action research for transformative change. Mm-hmm. So maybe you'd like to just tell us a little bit about your story, about your friendship, your collaboration, because that's so central to your paper, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I am an anthropologist who decided to become an educator. And I ended up at the Ministry of Education in Brazil for 9 years, coordinating the environmental education department for the whole country. There, I've coordinated several conferences, children's conference, and I've coordinated an international Let's Take Care of the Planet conference with 51 countries. And when we were preparing, Catherine asked if she could participate in this as a researcher in this conference, because she was interested in environmental education, and she can tell how she came.
Yeah, at the time, I was studying my master's in Latin American development studies, and I was writing my dissertation on environmental education in Brazil. And I found out that, incredibly fortuitously, at just the time when I was writing my dissertation, this international conference was taking place. This had been sort of progressively scaled up from conferences that took place in schools to regional conferences to a number of national conferences, and this was the first international conference. And so it was a wonderful way of being part of this and of seeing the kind of the culmination of this incredible participatory model of environmental education that Raquel and her team had come up with.
So, and that brought you to what is the sort of essence and the exciting bit, I think, in your paper, which is around what you term looping methodology. So do you want to maybe talk to us a little bit about what that is?
I started to work with participation and action research. A few schools around here to put our works together. I was working with disasters, risk reduction, and climate change. And they were working with a few contents related to climate change too, with resource scarcity. So we needed a metaphor and to show this complementarity, and it came the idea of the looping. And when we went to the dictionary to see how this dynamic looping of complementarity could be called, the word looping had this idea of a ribbon that is always in movement and it doesn't attach really, but put together this ribbon. And so it became this looping metaphor that puts ideas, methodologies, and concepts working in one together with the other ribbon. So like a gift.
That's beautiful. Catherine, did you want to add something?
Yeah. Diagrams are always reductive. You know, diagrams can depict things, but maybe not to their full extent. And we did actually have, we talked for some time about how best to depict this in a diagram, because what we liked about the definition was this idea that there could be multiple loops. There could be, I guess, kind of applying the metaphor, there could be multiple iterations of kind of knowledge sharing. There was the knowledge sharing, the knowledge generation that took place in the original research contexts. But then there was also this kind of this knowledge sharing and generation that occurred as two different research teams came together and kind of reflected upon their knowledge. So that's why in the diagram we have a kind of internal loop and then an external loop. But really, I think that the diagram simplifies because the looping can potentially go on infinitely. So I think the idea of the ribbon being what loops and that having kind of multiple folds in it, I think that's also quite it was quite important to how we understood this possibility for multiple iterations of knowledge generation.
Great, thank you. I wonder if you could just, because the other thing about your paper is that it is actually about working with young people, and you share through it some of the very positive stories about how they can engage with, visualize, and start to enact more transformative ways of being. Could you maybe give us just a couple of stories from that part of your paper?
Citizen science suggestions that we work with them are science methodologies to research their own reality, and the outcomes are fantastic. Like the idea was to work with spreadsheets on their the building of their school, and so they did it. They saw all the risks that their school was going through, but they weren't satisfied. So they went to all these nurseries in town, in the town of Cunha, and they went there and they did their spreadsheets about the vulnerability of these schools and sent it to the mayor. They were invited to present this, and they did some political action. So it provoked transformations on the ground through knowledge, through research, through the production of knowledge at the school, instead of just reproducing. All the co-authors were very important for this paper, and especially one co-author, the school coordinator for pedagogical purposes, writer here, because she was a co-worker in this research, a co-researcher. And without her participation, and what is incredible is that when you include participation into action research, you have a horizontal building of knowledge. So she did, and the students did, and I did. So it was very good. And through dialogue, we could put this looping methodology together.
I think that's another of the great things about the looping methodology is that it brings in new possibilities. It can bring together research teams who I think have to have a kind of shared understanding. Actually, it's about co-production of knowledge. So there is a foundation that has to be shared, and I think a shared approach in kind of the value of subjective knowledges, which again was one of the things in the original call for papers that really drew us to this, and the value of kind of listening for subjective knowledges. But I think actually one thing that we write in the paper is that our looping methodology was what we call emergent, in that it kind of came about in quite a natural, quite sort of fortuitous way. But actually, a looping methodology could be built into a research project. We think that action research projects would be really a really good place to sort of bring in these looping methodologies.
For me, what was really striking about your paper is that it as you say, sort of it illustrates the potential of an emergent process, right? And gives us the opportunity to think about how we actually more explicitly design our research in these very challenging contexts around issues that require interdisciplinarity, that require researchers to come together with, as you were saying, Raquel, to co-produce them in a horizontal way with communities to bring about that political change. So for me, that was what it fit very, very nicely in this special issue.